The silk catches morning light one last time as she kneels in the execution ground. You can hear the children screaming from the slave wagons behind the platform, their small voices calling for a mother who will never answer. The executioner's blade hangs, suspended in the air, and in that frozen moment before steel meets flesh, she turns her head toward the sound of her youngest daughter's cry. Her lips move, forming words no one will hear over the roar of the crowd, pressing forward to watch a woman die for a crime she may never have committed. Before we dive deeper into this haunting story, I'm genuinely curious. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. It still amazes me that these moments from 8 centuries ago can reach every corner of the globe today. This is Karakoram in the year 1219. 7 years into the codification of the Yasatha legal code that would govern the largest contiguous empire in human history. The law was carved into stone by Genghis Khan himself, each chisel strike echoing through the great yurt as scribes recorded words that would outlive empires. Among these laws, one stood above all others in its brutal clarity. Any married woman caught in adultery shall face death, her partner sharing her fate, no rank or bloodline offering salvation. But what the law proclaimed as justice, history would reveal as something far more sinister. The woman on the platform that morning was Lady Mandakai, a minor princess whose dowry had once secured an alliance between rival clans. Her husband stood among the assembled nobles, his face arranged in righteous fury, though careful observers noted how his hand already rested on documents transferring her property to his name. The musician she supposedly seduced had died 3 months earlier in what authorities called a riding accident. The witnesses who swore they'd seen passionate encounters were servants who'd gained their freedom through testimony. Every detail of her guilt had been carefully constructed, except for one problem. The dates of her alleged affairs corresponded exactly with nights when court records placed her attending religious ceremonies 50 miles away. But evidence mattered less than utility. Lady Mandakai knew financial secrets about her husband's military supply contract secrets that, if revealed, would expose a web of corruption reaching into the highest levels of government. Her execution wasn't punishment for adultery. It was the solution to a political problem dressed in the righteous robes of moral enforcement. The Yasa's adultery laws didn't emerge from religious doctrine or moral philosophy. They were born from Genghis Khan's most personal wounds. His mother Holon had been kidnapped on her wedding day by his father, stolen from her first husband in a raid that would define the Khan's childhood. His eldest son, Joki, entered the world 9 months after Holon's captivity among the Merkit tribe, a timeline that would shadow the boy's entire life with whispers of illegitimate birth. For a man building an empire, succession uncertainty posed greater danger than any enemy army. Better to spill blood in execution grounds than across the steppes in civil war over questioned bloodlines. So the law was carved: death for adulteresses, death for their lovers, slavery for their children. The code promised to protect the purity of noble bloodlines, to ensure every heir's legitimacy beyond doubt or whisper. What it actually created was the most efficient weapon for political assassination ever codified into law. The first execution under the new protocols came within months. A carpenter's wife in Karakoram caught with a traveling merchant by her own sister. The crowd gathered slowly, uncertain what to expect from this new justice. The woman knelt in rough wool, far from the silk robes that would drape future victims. No elaborate ceremony yet, no raised platforms, just swift step, justice delivered at dawn. The arrow took her through the heart. She crumpled forward without a sound, while her partner screamed until the second arrow silenced him. Word spread faster than wildfire across dry grass. The Khan's law had teeth. Within years, the executions developed their own terrible refinement. Platforms rose higher for better crowd visibility. Simple arrows gave way to hanging, then to the ceremonial sword for nobility. Each class died according to its station, maintaining hierarchy even in death. The spectacle of justice transformed into entertainment, then into tradition. Children grew up thinking this was how the world had always worked, would always work. Lady Manjakai's execution followed this established ritual with mechanical precision. The shamans blessed the blade while chanting prayers that transformed judicial murder into sacred duty. She was positioned on the platform, her posture adjusted for optimal striking angle. The crowd fell silent as the executioner raised his sword, sunlight dancing along steel that had already claimed dozens of lives that season. Her final words were lost beneath the executioner's strike-a-clean separation of head from body that sent the crowd into savage approval. But something unexpected happened in the moment after her death. Her eldest daughter, watching from the slave wagon, began reciting her mother's last testimony about the financial corruption. The child's voice carried across the suddenly quiet square, repeating numbers and names that her mother had made her memorize. Guards rushed to silence the girl, but the information had already spread through the crowd like wildfire through dry grass. Within hours, 3 ministers would flee the capital. Within days, her husband's military career would collapse under investigation. Lady Manjakai had turned her execution into confession of a different sort, not of adultery, but of the corruption that killed her. This pattern repeated itself across the empire with devastating frequency. The adultery laws didn't just punish unfaithful wives, they eliminated inconvenient women who knew too much, threatened the wrong people, or simply stood in the way of more profitable marriages. A merchant spouse who could read her husband's fraudulent accounts, a translator who revealed treaty violations, a noble lady whose brother commanded troops loyal to a rival faction. Each found herself accused, tortured into confession, and executed regardless of actual guilt. The torture chambers beneath the imperial palace developed their own terrible efficiency. Professional confessors worked in shifts, extracting admissions tailored to specific political needs. They had templates for confessions, requiring only personalization through agony. A woman might arrive accused of one lover and leave having admitted to seducing 5 men. Each name carefully selected to implicate whoever her accuser needed removed. The extracted testimonies followed identical structures across decades, the same progression from denial through breaking to elaborate admission. The same phrases appearing in confession after confession, like a signature of systematic scripting. Between sessions in the dungeons, torturers would bring the accused women's children to the cell bars, forcing mothers to watch as guards demonstrated what would happen to them if innocence was maintained. The youngest, barely able to walk, would reach through the bars calling for mama, while guards discussed slave market prices for noble children. Maternal instinct proved more effective than hot irons for breaking resistance. Children bore the cruelest consequences of their mother's executions. When a woman died for adultery, her offspring entered slavery, regardless of their father's rank or their own innocence. 7-year-old boys who'd been practicing calligraphy in palace courtyards found themselves hauling water in mining camps. 12-year-old daughters raised in silk learned to scrub floors in the houses where they'd once played as guests. The transformation from noble child to property happened faster than young minds could process. Some executions required children to testify against their mothers. 8-year-old witnesses stood before tribunals, commanded to confirm supposed adultery. Denial brought beatings. Silence brought threats against younger siblings. The system created wounds that festered across generations. Matricide through forced perjury that survivors would carry into adulthood and beyond. The slave markets that surrounded execution grounds developed specialized procedures for processing noble children. Traders examined them for signs of rebellion or resignation. The ones who still showed fight brought higher prices for hard labor. The broken ones suited domestic service. Each child got sorted according to their trauma response. The machinery of exploitation ran on precisely calibrated misery. Yet within this machinery of death, strange contradictions flourished. While wives died for suspected adultery, their husbands freely visited the pleasure houses that lined every major city. The Golden Moon brothel in Karakoram operated under imperial license, its workers paying taxes and owning property. The same governor who executed 3 wives in a single morning for adultery would spend that evening in the brothel's silk-draped chambers. Mongol law protected prostitutes as legitimate workers while condemning wives to death for the same physical acts. The hypocrisy was absolute, the inequality written into the empire's foundation. A Mongol captain could father sons with brothel workers without shame, his wife accepting these children into her household because law demanded it. But should that same wife smile too long at another man, morning would find her kneeling on blood-stained planks. The mathematics of permitted pleasure and forbidden passion cut sharp as any executioner's sword. Some women found cracks in the system's certainty. The law technically allowed husbands to spare their wives through payment of livestock, a mercy clause that transformed women's lives into commodity calculations. The exact price varied by region and rank: 200 goats for nobles, 54 merchants, 24 craftsmen. Wealthy husbands could choose between execution and enslavement of their wives, making decisions based purely on financial optimization. Did her death bring greater profit through remarriage and inheritance, or did her servitude offer better long-term value? The bleating of 300 goats once filled Karakoram's western gate. As a desperate merchant brought his entire fortune to purchase his wife's life. The governor counted animals from his window, while the merchant fell to his knees in courtyard mud, begging for mercy with every coin in his coffers. The law permitted this transaction, transforming livestock into breath itself. His wife emerged from prison enslaved Chanzeliv, but legally dead. She would serve in her husband's household as property, her status extinguished, though her body survived. But for women caught in political crosshairs, no amount of goats could purchase salvation. When accusations served larger purposes than personal revenge, when stakes rose beyond family honor to imperial power, the payment system crumbled against political necessity. The regent, Tregin Cotton, mastered this dark art during her rule in the 1240s. She wielded adultery charges with surgical precision, eliminating political rivals through bedroom accusations that no one could refute. Her torture chambers processed women whose only crime was possessing knowledge that threatened her power consolidation. Fatima, an influential advisor, died for adultery that existed only in confessions extracted through 4 days of systematic agony. Her execution allowed Tregin to redistribute trade licenses, promote loyalists, and reshape the entire administrative structure. The adultery charge served as the key that unlocked a dozen political doors. The screams that echoed from Tregin's dungeons marked the transformation of judicial process into political weapon. Each cry punctuated another turn of the screw, another name extracted for future arrest warrants. The torturer worked with artists' focus, understanding that confession required careful cultivation. Too much damage killed before words emerged. Too little failed to break the will. He operated in the space between, where pain birthed whatever truth power demanded. Foreign wives women married to Mongol nobles to seal diplomatic alliances proved especially vulnerable. Princess Alakai of the Jin dynasty came to her marriage as a living treaty, her body the seal on peace between empires. When that alliance crumbled under Mongol expansion, she found herself accused of adultery with a palace musician who died 2 weeks earlier. The mathematics were brutal. Her presence had become inconvenient rather than essential, her diplomatic value obsolete. She died not for betrayal of her marriage bed, but for the crime of representing an alliance her husband's government no longer needed. The executioners who carried out these sentences developed their own professional detachment. The blade master who conducted Lady Manjaki's execution had performed 300 similar deaths, though he'd stopped counting seasons ago. He maintained his tools with craftsman's care, spent more on Persian steel and Japanese whetstones than most families earned in a year. His children attended good schools on blood money. His daughters received generous dowries funded by other daughters' deaths. He never asked whether the women he killed were guilty. His blade served whoever paid, regardless of truth. Between executions, he would clean his sword with methodical precision. Blood corroded steel if left too long. The economics of his profession allowed comfortable living, but dreams came populated with faces he'd erased. The psychological toll manifested in unexpected ways, not nightmares of executions, but dreams of empty platforms. The absence of death disturbed more than its presence. Archaeological evidence recovered from execution sites reveals the demographic precision of these political murders, disguised as moral enforcement. Skeletal remains cluster in specific age ranges and social positions that correlate with political upheaval rather than random adultery. The bones tell stories that contemporary records deliberately obscured. Ground-penetrating radar at former execution grounds reveals layers upon layers of human remains, predominantly female, each stratum representing another wave of women eliminated for threatening power structures. The most haunting discovery came from slave market sites connected to execution grounds. Children's toys mixed with iron shackles, tiny shoes abandoned in the mud. Personal items that speak to interrupted childhoods. Each artifact represents a family destroyed for political convenience. Modern DNA analysis confirms what folk songs preserved encoded warnings. The executed women's bloodlines survived through their enslaved children. Their descendants now number in millions across former Mongol territories, carrying genetic scars of ancestral femicide. The Yasa's influence spread far beyond the empire's borders, carried along trade routes, and absorbed into legal systems from Russia to China. The virus of legalized femicide adapted to local contexts while maintaining its core inequality. The presumption of female guilt in sexual matters, the use of bedroom accusations to eliminate inconvenient women, the transformation of political murder into moral enforcement. Contemporary honor killings in dozens of cultures echo the Yasa's logic: same accusations, same gendered application, same deadly efficiency. In modern Mongolia, the legacy persists in subtle ways. Genealogical databases reveal maternal lines that terminate abruptly. Women whose recorded existence ends without death notation or explanation. Young women researching their ancestry find these voids in family trees and understand instinctively what they mean. Great-great-grandmothers who vanished into execution grounds, their names deliberately erased, but their absence still felt. A cafe conversation in modern Ulaanbaatar captures this haunting inheritance. 3 women discuss marriage contracts over coffee, and the conversation drifts toward family histories, traced through maternal lines that suddenly terminate in silence. One mentions her great-great-grandmother's name, appears in records until 1843, then vanishes without explanation. The historical amnesia runs deep through Mongolian families' women's names, disappearing not through natural death, but through judicial erasure. The jade hairpin that Lady Mandakai wore to her execution survived 5 generations through her daughter's careful preservation, clutched in a 7-year-old's hand as the slave wagon rolled toward distant markets. It carried more than memory. It held promise that truth would eventually emerge from shadows where power sought to bury it. The hairpin now rests in a museum case, its provenance traced through patient scholarship. Visitors touch the glass with reverent fingers, connecting across centuries to women who died for truth, who preserved memory despite slavery's degradation. The parking lot that now covers Karakoram's execution ground hosts ordinary commerce drivers, unaware they rest above bones of women who died for knowledge, for inconvenient competence, for the crime of threatening powerful men. Construction workers reported finding unusual quantities of human remains during foundation excavation. But economic pressures overruled archaeological preservation. Progress paved over evidence, though the ground remembers what pavement covers. In the end, the executioner's blade cut both ways. It severed heads while creating martyrs. It silenced voices while amplifying their messages through outrage. It served power while undermining authority. The platform meant to preserve order became the symbol of its corruption. Every woman who died there left an impression deeper than physical remains. A psychic scar in the geography that sensitive visitors still report feeling without understanding its origin. She kneels forever in that morning sunlight, silk robes pooling around her, children calling from slave wagons, blade descending toward her neck. But she also lives forever in every descendant who carries her DNA. Every scholar who recovers her story, every visitor who pauses before her jade hairpin to consider the cost of truth. The law that condemned her exists now only as historical curiosity, studied by scholars of systematic oppression. The dynasty that killed her fell to descendants of women it murdered. Time delivered the verdict that morning's crowd could not. Her blood on those planks wrote an indictment that outlasted the dynasty that spilled it, a darkness across centuries that no amount of progress can fully illuminate, a shadow that stretches forward into every legal system still shaped by the assumption that women's bodies belong to law before they belong to themselves.